So this is a comparatively easy section of physics and also scoring subject of physics in JEE, which is the part of heat and thermodynamics. It is not a single chapter, but a cluster of chapters involving similar physical concepts. Okay. And in totality, like the entire portion of heat and thermodynamics has a weightage of around 15%, 15% in JEE mains as well as JEE advanced, similar kind of percentage. So this section will consist of a number of different individual chapters. So I'll just list out the chapters for you first. So we start off heat and thermodynamics by understanding thermal properties of matter. So they are in the form of two things. One is thermal expansion of materials, and the other is calorimetry, which has to do with the understanding of heat capacity and latent heat, etc. Then we move on to so-called thermodynamics of an ideal gas. So in that we will have kinetic theory of gases. Then we will have first law of thermodynamics and application. And then we will have another portion called heat engines, which is based on the application of first law, but to particular type of systems. And then the final part will be heat transfer, which has to do with conduction. Very brief description about convection, but not anything significant really. And then radiation. So the maximum weightage in terms of number of questions and type of questions which come in this are going to be first law of thermodynamics, heat engines, conduction, and radiation. The other things are very simple and more or less formula based. So there will be few questions, but very less weightage from the other parts over here. Okay. So this is a rough description of what we are going to be doing in the next few weeks, heat and thermodynamics. Also, this is part of Concepts of Physics Part 2 with H.C. Verma. So this entire portion is there in H.C. Verma Volume 2. Okay. And of course, it is there in ITN's Hub module number 3 of physics, which I'm sure all of you have got, but in case you need a copy of it, I can always send you a PDF, just let me know. Okay, so let's begin. It's a pretty simple section of physics, nothing very difficult or worrying. Okay. So let us start by understanding what is heat and what is temperature. Okay. So as I'm sure all of you know, heat is a form of energy. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right. It's a form of energy, or more precisely, we call it thermal energy. Okay. So all matter in all states possesses a certain amount of heat energy or thermal energy. But if you look closer at the microscopic level, what is heat, or let's say at the molecular level, very interesting to understand that at the molecular level, heat is nothing but kinetic energy. Heat is kinetic energy. So in solids, it is primarily the vibrational kinetic energy of molecules. Okay. In liquids and gases, it is a combination of translational and rotational motion. Okay. And also in some cases vibrational. For example, polyatomic gas molecules which are larger in shape, I mean larger in volume, etc., like methane gas, etc. Within the molecule, there might be vibration of the atoms which are taking place. Okay, with the interatomic uh, attractive forces acting like potential energy uh, terms. Okay, about which the atoms can vibrate. So in that case, in those type of molecules, there can be vibrational kinetic energy also. But for example, noble gases, monoatomic gases like helium, argon, etc., they don't have vibrational kinetic energy. The molecules are only single particles, single atoms. So they are like point masses. So the kinetic energy is just translational kinetic energy. In diatomic gases like oxygen, O2, hydrogen, H2, etc., the molecules are linear in shape. They are dumbbell shaped. So they are this type of shape. So they might be moving about like this. So there is translation, but they might also be rotating about their axis like this. So the general motion is a combination of rotation and translation. Like if you throw a stick in the air, how it goes, it typically has rotation about its center of mass. But while that is happening, the center of mass is describing that parabolic path, projectile motion. So that type of motion. So it's a combination of rotation and translation. Okay, same for liquid molecules. The only difference between liquids and gases, which we will understand in detail later, is that in liquids the molecules are free to move about, but they are still having some kind of intermolecular attractive force because of which the density of the liquid is constant, or the total volume of a given mass of liquid is constant. So the liquid can only take the shape of the container, but it doesn't really occupy the volume of the container according to the container. It has its own fixed volume. Whereas in the case of gases, intermolecular attractive force is completely absent. So it does not, a gas does not have a fixed density. So that is why a gas not only takes the shape of the container, but also occupies whatever volume the container has. Okay. So the difference between liquids and gases, Tej, is that only that in liquids there is some amount of intermolecular attractive force. It is not enough to keep the molecules fixed. The molecules can move about, but it is enough to keep the volume of a given mass of liquid fixed or keep the density of the liquid constant. Whereas in the case of gaseous media, as you know, there is complete absence of intermolecular attractive force. So the gas molecules don't influence each other in any way other than when they collide with each other. So gas generally takes the volume of a container, not only the shape of its container, but it also it occupies the entire volume that is available to it, and its density is completely adjustable according to that. So that was the point. So anyway, now coming back to what is heat. So heat is the form of energy that any material, whether it is a solid or a liquid or a gas, the form of energy that it possesses because its molecules are always in a state of motion. Even in a solid, something that is not so intuitive because in a solid from outside, everything appears to be fixed. Okay? But if we look microscopically at the molecular structure of solids, the molecules have fixed mean positions, but about their mean positions, they are vibrating. And how fast they are vibrating or how much kinetic energy they possess when they are vibrating is a function of the temperature. A body at larger temperature has more, a solid material at larger temperature or a higher temperature has more vibrational kinetic energy for its molecules compared to a solid at lower temperature. Similarly, a liquid at higher temperature has more translational and rotational kinetic energy. The molecules are moving about like this within the liquid or within the gas, but they have more average kinetic energy per molecule if the temperature is more and less if the temperature is less. Yeah, we can't see the vibration. That's true because that's happening at a very small scale. The amplitude of vibration is very small because it's happening at the molecular level. But nonetheless, there is vibration happening. There is enough evidence of that. Okay, the whole process of heat conduction itself is evidence of that. So basically, if you touch a hot metallic rod, your hand experiences an uncomfortable sensation of a heat sting That happens because the vibrational kinetic energy of molecules on that metallic rod is it's causing collisions with the molecules of your hand surface, which is transferring energy very rapidly from the rod onto your hand, and that's why you feel the sting of the heat energy. Okay, so the idea here is that at the molecular level, everything is always at motion. It just cannot happen that molecules are at rest. In fact, there is a theoretical state of matter which is called the absolute zero. Zero on the absolute scale or Kelvin scale. That is said to be the theoretical state at which molecular activity ceases. That means there is no molecular kinetic energy or no
But
motion
it
of
is very
molecules.
difficult to achieve.
Yes, it is not only difficult to achieve, it is virtually impossible to achieve, because logically it cannot make sense that we are able to absorb all the kinetic energy of molecules and bring them completely to rest. It's never going to happen. They will always have might have minute amount of motion, so we might achieve a temperature very close to absolute zero, and that is also very difficult. Achieving a temperature like zero point 0.1 Kelvin or even achieving a temperature like 3 or 4 Kelvin is extremely difficult and requires a lot of technology to be able to achieve at the physics lab level. But 0 Kelvin is an absolute temperature which cannot be achieved at the physics lab level. Okay. Yeah, example of vibrational kinetic energy of liquids and gases, Krish, I'll just give you. Any imagine any gas molecule which is quite a large polyatomic molecule. It consists of large number of atoms, like the methane gas atom, the CH4. It has four hydrogen atoms, which are arranged sort of symmetrically with respect to the central carbon atom. So you might have heard that it has what is called a tetrahedral structure. Right? It looks like a tetrahedron, the methane gas molecule. Now it's a pretty large molecule, and the bonds between the carbon and hydrogen, they are covalent bonds. Okay, they are sharing electrons, so the bonds are comparatively weak. So the molecule will always be in a state of some kind of vibration. Even diatomic gases at high temperatures, at extremely high temperatures, experience vibration. It's like, a diatomic molecule consists of two atoms which are together like this, like a dumbbell. Okay, but at very high temperatures, they might be doing this. They might be vibrating like this. So that's an example of vibrational kinetic energy in case of gaseous or even liquid molecules. Yes, typically every bond will have a capacity to vibrate, because you can visualize bonds like springs. There is an ideal bond length at which there is maximum stability, and that is the minimum of the potential energy curve. So that is why when we look at intermolecular distance versus the intermolecular bond energy, that is a graph that is like this. That is like this. So there is a certain distance, let's say R naught, at which the energy is minimum, potential energy is minimum. So that is the stable equilibrium position, and that is where the two atoms between which there is, yeah. So basically, if we want the molecular atoms to vibrate faster, we have to supply more heat. But the thing is, we cannot stop the vibration altogether at any point of time, or we cannot stop the motion at least altogether at any point of time. For that, we have to achieve 0 Kelvin, which is physically not possible. So the question is how fast they are vibrating, how fast they are moving, how fast they are rotating. It's not a question of whether they are moving or not. All molecules will always be in a state of some kind of motion. But the average amount of energy that is there for the motion, the kinetic energy, that is a function of the temperature. Okay, so that is about this. Okay, so heat is nothing but kinetic energy when we talk about heat at the molecular level. Okay? So it is not surprising, therefore, that heat has the regular SI unit of the same unit as energy or work done.
Yes.
Yes, correct. That's joules. Okay, but a very common unit that we use sometimes is calorie. Okay, common unit of heat is calorie. And one of the first things you should know, remember as a formula here, or remember as a value, is the conversion. 1 calorie of heat is equivalent to 4.18 or approximately 4.2 joules. Okay. So this is an important conversion that we'll keep referring to while solving problems. Okay. And this particular equation, calorie to joule, it is called the mechanical equivalent of heat. What it means is that if we convert 1 calorie of heat into mechanical energy, like for example, an internal combustion engine does that. Na? It converts the heat energy that we get from combustion or burning fuel into mechanical energy in the form of the kinetic energy of a piston. The piston inside the cylinder going forward and backwards because of alternately explosions or combustion of fuel happening inside the chamber, and then exhaust gases getting pushed out, so vacuumizing of it. So alternately a piston keeps getting pushed forward and backwards. That is the process that happens in what is called the cylinder of an internal combustion engine. And typically an engine will consist of multiple cylinders. Like there are 4-cylinder engines, 6-cylinder engines, V12 engines, which are 12 cylinders. So these cylinders are simultaneously creating kinetic energy in the form of pushing forward and backwards of pistons. And then through a mechanical system, that translational forward backward motion is converted into rotational motion of a flywheel. Okay. So that is all part of mechanical engineering, and through that you will understand that it's possible to interconvert heat into mechanical energy and vice versa. So a process that converts heat into mechanical work or mechanical energy, like kinetic energy, it is called a heat engine. Whereas a process that converts mechanical work into heat, or it extracts heat by doing mechanical work on a system, that is called a refrigeration system. Like the compressor of an air conditioner or the compressor of a freezer or a refrigerator, it does that. Electrical energy is first converted to mechanical energy, which makes the compressor do this kind of motion. And as a result of this alternating compression and expansion of a chamber, heat is extracted from it. So that is the reverse of what a heat engine does. So it's always possible to interconvert heat into mechanical energy and vice versa. And this is the conversion in terms of units. 1 calorie of heat is equal to 4.2 joules approximately. And this equation is called the mechanical equivalent of heat. Because traditionally the unit of heat is calorie. So it's equivalent in the unit of mechanical work or energy, which is joules. Its equivalent is 4.18 joules. Okay, so that is about heat. Okay, now next moving on, we'll discuss about temperature. So as you know, the common understanding of temperature is that it is the degree of hotness or coldness of a body, which is a very loose sort of definition because hotness and coldness is something which is very subjective. If you dip your hand in cold water and then pick up a metallic cylinder or something, it will appear to be hot. But if you dip your hand in hot water and pick up the same piece of metallic object, which is at room temperature, now it will appear to be cold. So whether something appears to be hot or cold depends as much on our sensation as on anything else. So there is a more proper physics definition of the term temperature. And that definition is like this, that temperature is a comparison between two bodies or two materials. That comparison tells us in which direction the heat will flow from one body to another. Okay, so if a certain body has a larger temperature than another body, then when the two bodies come in contact, heat will flow from higher temperature to lower temperature. So temperature is that physical parameter which tells us the direction of heat flow, the direction in which heat as a form of energy will flow. Okay? So that's one way to define temperature. Okay. Temperature is a physical parameter that indicates the direction of heat transfer between two bodies or materials in thermal contact. Yeah, Diti, what happens is, na, if we subject, this is what you're asking is actually part of the chapter of calorimetry that we're going to come to. So if we have a solid material and we start heating it, so what happens is that initially the vibrational kinetic energy of its molecules is increasing. So as we observe that thing happening at a at a material level, what we observe is that the temperature is increasing. So that is telling us that yes, the molecules are vibrating faster and faster. And as more and more heat is supplied, the vibration is increasing more and more. So the temperature is increasing more and more. But then it reaches a critical state. The vibration reaches a critical state where any more energy supplied, and instead of vibrating faster, the molecules break free. So, they reach that critical stage of vibration where little bit more energy is supplied and the intermolecular bonds get disturbed and the material changes state from solid to liquid. So they get free of each other a bit, and the molecules go from an arrangement where they are having fixed positions but vibrating about the fixed position to an arrangement where they can now translate or move about because there is no intermolecular, I mean, the intermolecular attractive forces are not so strong. So when that happens, there is a state change. So that happens at a particular temperature when the vibration has become strong enough that the intermolecular bonds are ready to rearrange. Okay, so I hope this clarifies the point you're asking. Okay.
Sir, what is thermal contact?
Sorry, beta, come again. Thermal contact.
Thermal contact.
Yeah, thermal contact means we will say two materials are in thermal contact when they can exchange heat. Okay, so for example, obviously directly bringing two materials in contact means that they are in thermal contact. They can exchange heat through conduction. But even bringing two materials close to each other, they can exchange heat. But that will be through radiation or that will be through convection current set up in the air around them. Understood my point? No?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
But for example, if I have covered this material with an insulating material, another insulating material, like some thermocol or foam or something, which has a very high heat capacity, and then I bring it against the other material, that insulating material will prevent heat transfer from happening from one to the other. So we will say that they are not in thermal contact anymore. है
Yes,
Or
sir.
like when you keep coffee in a vacuum flask, okay, why it is the coffee remains hot for a very long time, and for an ideal flask it would remain hot forever. That is because the coffee inside is not in thermal contact with the air outside because there is vacuum in between. So it's preventing radiation. I mean, it's preventing conduction and convection. And to prevent the radiation, we've silvered the surface from inside. So radiation is also prevented from happening. So that is the meaning of being in thermal contact versus not being in thermal contact. Okay, so at an experimental level, you can say that how we can determine temperature of two materials, or at least how we can say that two materials are having, which one is having greater temperature, which one is having lesser temperature. So T1, T2, if we have two bodies or two materials at two different temperatures. Okay, Tej, I'll come to your question. But if, for example, T1 is greater than T2, then heat will transfer from this to this. Heat as a form of energy will transfer like this. Until what happens? Their temperatures equalize. So basically, heat flows from higher temperature to lower temperature. Okay, until a state of what is called thermal equilibrium is reached. So when there is a state of thermal equilibrium, there is uniform temperature. So there is no heat flow or no heat transfer. Further that takes place. Okay, so they hope that answers your question. So if two bodies are already at the same temperature, then when we bring them in thermal contact, there won't be any heat transfer. But if initially they are at different temperatures, then the heat transfer will take place and the one at higher temperature will cool down, the one at lower temperature will heat up. Till what happens? Their temperatures equalize. So there is thermal equilibrium. So further there is no heat exchange that is happening or heat transfer that is happening. Okay. So you can say this is an experimental way to understand temperature. That how would I determine that? Okay, a certain material is at higher temperature than another material or not. So I bring them in thermal contact. If heat is flowing from A to B, then that means A is at higher temperature than B. If heat is flowing from B to A, then that means A is at lower temperature. So like that, we can compare the temperature of different bodies. Okay? But at a more formal level or at a more conceptual level, temperature is something more interesting. And it is nothing but a measure of the average kinetic energy of molecules. So temperature, thermodynamic definition of temperature, or the definition of temperature according to thermodynamics. Okay. So in this, the absolute temperature, okay, of a body or a material. So the absolute temperature we denote with the symbol capital T, that is temperature measured in kelvins. Okay, I'm coming to the different scales of temperature very soon, but I'm sure all of you are aware the absolute scale is referred to as the Kelvin scale, named after Lord Kelvin, who was one of the foremost physicists involved with heat and thermodynamics. So this absolute temperature is a quantity which is directly proportional to the average kinetic energy of the molecules. Okay. So absolute temperature is directly proportional to the molecular average molecular kinetic energy. Now again, if we are talking about the absolute temperature of a solid, then we mean the average vibrational kinetic energy of its molecules. If we talk about a liquid or a gas, then it's a combination of the different type of kinetic energies. Yeah, sure. Write this down.
Sir, may you scroll a bit up? I didn't write that.
Sorry, come again, madam.
Sir, may you scroll a bit up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this portion.
Sir, we have not noted from starting.
Yeah, this is only the part from starting. Okay. Acha, before this, I had given the just the overview of the chapters. So this you need not note down just now also.
Sir,
Yeah,
sir, I have one conceptual doubt.
yeah, tell me.
Sir, when if I imagine that there are two bodies,
Ah,
one of higher temperature and one of lower temperature,
correct.
both are kept in close contact with each other.
Right.
So, if I imagine at the molecular level,
हाँ,
the body having the higher temperature will have more kinetic energy.
yes, it's molecules like let's say they are both solids है ना, जैसे अपने
Yes.
पास दो metallic cylinders है ना. Now one
Uh-huh.
is at let's say a temperature of 50 degrees C, the other is at a temperature of 20 degrees C, है ना. So the molecules in the 50 degrees C one, they are vibrating faster.
Yes.
So when you bring them in contact, what is happening? The surface molecules are colliding with each other as they are vibrating.
Yes. Yes.
So always in a collision, what happens? The body having more kinetic energy, it transfers energy to the other one.
Sir, however, that process happens, but body having the lower temperature will also transfer the energy to the higher body, no, as a reaction.
It does, but it absorbs more energy than it transfers. So it ends up
Okay.
gaining energy. है ना?
Okay,
So
I
it's
had
actually as
doubt
simple
in
as
this
that. You
part.
think of an experiment where carom board पे suppose you have two carom coins, है ना? Both of them are moving, but they are on collision path. ठीक है?
हाँ sir, समझा.
Now the faster one will always end up slowing down, and the slower one will always end up speeding up.
Okay sir.
है ना?
Okay.
Whether it is a one dimensional collision or it's a oblique collision or जैसा भी हो ना, वो हमेशा ऐसा होता है.
Okay sir, understood.
So that is like bit of application of collision theory also. You have started collisions in center of mass chapter, system of particles.
No sir.
Acha, so you are going to start, I'm sure, pretty soon, na? You must have started center of mass, na?
Yes sir.
So next thing you will see in that after momentum conservation, you'll be studying collisions in detail. So you will understand this once even better once you see that any collision that occurs between two bodies which are in motion, or even one body in motion colliding with something else which is at rest. Always the one having lower kinetic energy gains kinetic energy, and the other one having higher kinetic energy loses kinetic energy. That is something that happens as a result of the collision impulse.
Sir, we have studied till motion of center of mass.
So you are coming to collisions very soon now in the next 2 or 3 lectures. Tej, you will be doing some selective questions from HC Verma and the module fully. So I'll be sending you a list of questions to do from HC Verma. But in any case, the number of questions is less in these chapters. They are small chapters. Yeah, Didi, so what you're basically saying is that if heat is transferring through air, now air is gaseous medium, right? It's a fluid. So in a gaseous medium or a fluid, the heat transfer typically happens through a process called convection currents. You must have studied about ocean currents also in geography, and convection currents that occur through the atmosphere and all that. So in the process of convection currents, there is always what we call dissipation of heat, because there are frictional losses, etc., because of suspended particles, gas molecules, etc. No, there will not be conceptual questions versus so much. The questions will be this thing only. The questions will be numerical only mostly, and we are coming to that part. Okay. But to understand the equations we are going to study next, you first of all need to understand these conceptual properties, and you need to understand what is temperature at a physical level. It is nothing but a measure of the average kinetic energy of molecules. And what is heat at a physical level? It is nothing but the kinetic energy. It's the energy in the form of the molecular kinetic energy.
Sir, there are mainly three ways of heat transfer.
Yes, conduction, convection, and radiation. That's correct. Okay. Now we will come to that also in heat transfer, and we'll see that in different kind of materials, different kind of mode of heat transfer is predominant. So in the case of fluids, which includes liquids and gases, the predominant method of heat transfer is convection. In case of solids, the predominant method is conduction. Yes, the answer to your question is yes. It does depend on the physical state of the body also. Okay. And Diti, coming back to your question, what I think you're trying to say is that if between two materials, I increase the distance, then the rate at which heat will transfer from one to the other will decrease. And yes, that is correct, because the heat is spreading over larger volume. Okay. Yeah, and radiation happens through, now radiation is a different mode of heat transfer. It happens through electromagnetic waves. So all surfaces are constantly in the process of radiation. So, like, for example, when you see a hot material like a glowing piece of metal, because its temperature might be very high, or you see a burning coal in a coal fire or something, when you see it glowing, that color that you see, that is because of the electromagnetic radiation. After all, light is also electromagnetic radiation. Okay, so radiation is happening all around us all the time. Any object that you see, you're able to see its color because it is radiating light waves from it. But the higher the temperature, the more the rate at which this radiation happens. Yes, so lamp is also radiating, but even a piece of paper is radiating. And interestingly, everything is always absorbing also and radiating also. So for example, any piece, any object like a tabletop or the surface of a body, it is constantly absorbing heat from the radiations that are around it, and at the same time, it's also uh, emitting radiations. Okay? And related to that is something called the there are some laws related to that which we'll study as part of the radiation chapter. It is called the Kirchhoff's law of radiations. We'll be coming to that. Okay. Now, anyway, so let's continue in our understanding of the first two basic quantities, heat and temperature. So temperature is scroll down. So temperature is a quantity which is proportionate to, I mean, absolute temperature. Temperature on Kelvin scale is a quantity which is proportional to the average kinetic energy of the molecules of a material. Okay. Now, another useful little mathematical part that you should know is the conversion between different scales of temperature. So temperature scales. Okay. The SI scale, Standard International Scale, is Kelvin, and in this scale, the melting point of ice at standard pressure is 273 Kelvin, and the boiling point of water at standard atmospheric pressure is 373 Kelvin. Okay. And therefore, you can see that between these two states, the interval is divided into 100 equal parts, 100 Kelvin. That is the temperature difference between these two. Harshal, you want me to move the page in which direction? You have to note down something or? Okay. Okay, finish writing now. We'll discuss. More up. Okay.
Sir, we have written till 4.2 joules.
Okay. Yeah, this part, no?
Yes.
Okay, done?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now let's come to the temperature scale. So this is the first one, the SI unit. Okay, then we have the very common unit of Celsius or centigrade. So in this, the melting point of ice, as you know, is 0 degrees C, and the boiling point of water is 100 degrees C. So in terms of temperature difference or any interval of temperature, this variation is same equal to 100 degrees C. So what this means is that if a body has a temperature of, for example, x degrees C, then that temperature is x plus 273 in Kelvin. Okay. And it also means that if the temperature is increased, the change in temperature is, let's say, delta x in Kelvin. So that is the same thing as delta x in degrees C also. So if T1 is x1 degrees C and T2 is x1 plus delta x degrees C, then T1 will be x1 plus 273 Kelvin and T2 will be x1 plus 273 plus same variation delta x in Kelvin. So it's very easy to interconvert between Kelvin and degree C. Now the next one is the Fahrenheit scale, as you know. So in Fahrenheit scale, this is 32 degrees Fahrenheit and this is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So in this scale, the interval becomes different. So that is why a temperature change of x degrees C or delta x degrees C is not the same as the temperature difference in Fahrenheit. This is 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. So now the interconversion between degrees C and Fahrenheit. So x degrees C is equal to 32 plus x into 9 by 5 in degrees C. Okay. Because a temperature change of delta x degrees C is equivalent to delta x into 9 by 5 degrees Fahrenheit, or a temperature change of delta y in Fahrenheit is equivalent to delta y into 5 by 9 in degrees C. Okay, so similarly, y degrees Fahrenheit will be y into 5 by 9 minus 32 in degrees C. Oh, sorry, this one should be Fahrenheit above. So in the above equation, I'm converting from degree C to degree Fahrenheit. In the below equation, just the reverse of that. So you don't need to really memorize this formula. You can just logically understand this from the diagram above.
Sir, we should know the interconversion of Celsius to Fahrenheit.
Sorry, you should?
Know the interconversion of
Yeah,
Celsius
yeah,
to Fahrenheit.
absolutely. You should know how to convert one scale to the other. Now to convert one scale to the other, I'm just going to show you with some examples. You don't need to memorize the formula. You just need to keep these values in mind. Then you can use this diagram only to convert. Okay, so let's do a quick example. Convert a temperature of 25 degrees C to Fahrenheit. Then okay, so just do these three quickly. Yeah, Didi, that is correct. The process of thermal transfer or heat transfer will be very slow. So more than the thing that we cannot achieve thermal equilibrium, the idea is it will take very, very long to achieve thermal equilibrium. Yeah, let me check the answers you got. Correct. First one is correct. Yash and Vashist. Tej, you have given the answer to which one? The second one? Yeah, Yash, your second one is also correct. Yash Madhani, that is. No, that's not correct. Okay, so now see, yeah, okay, I'll wait. Okay. You can use the formula from above, but what I would suggest is try to understand it from the diagram above the formula.
Sir, how can we calculate it from the diagram?
Yeah, I'll explain. So temperature net represents a particular point on that scale. No? So just see where that point coincides with the other scale. Okay, so let us say this is my temperature scale on degrees C. Okay, so this is 0 degrees C, this is 100 degrees C. Okay, so 25 degrees C is sitting over here. So it is 1/4 of this length now. This is 1/4 of L, where assume this whole length of the scale from here to here, if it is L, and this is 1/4 of the length. Okay. Now compare this with the Fahrenheit scale. So it's the same length, but now this is sitting at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is sitting at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. So the corresponding point here is again at 1/4 of this length. Okay. So if this is some x in Fahrenheit, then x minus 32, that is this length, is 1/4 L, and L is basically what in Fahrenheit? It is 180. Okay. So x minus 32 is 1/4 of 180. So that is 45. So x must be 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. And that is where the formula is also coming, that x degrees C or 25 degrees C is equal to 25 into 9/5 plus 32. So, okay. So now likewise, the second one I've given you is a temperature of how much? It's minus 60 degrees C, na? Minus 60. Okay. So let's say this is 0 degrees C. This is 100 degrees C. This is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. This is okay. Now my given temperature is sitting somewhere here, minus 60 degrees C. So it is this temperature difference is how much? 60 in degrees C. So that is 60 into 9/5 in Fahrenheit. So it's okay. So whatever this is, it is sitting at this delta T. So X in degrees Fahrenheit is becoming 32 minus delta T in Fahrenheit. So it is 32 minus 108 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is minus of 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, 76. My mistake. Okay. So this minus 60 degrees C is equal to this thing. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying that rather than apply the formula, na, just understand the process logically like this. It's very easy to convert. Okay, so let's come to the last of these. We have to convert 120 degrees Fahrenheit to Kelvin. Anybody got the answer? Shweta, check your calculation again. Okay, done now. How much is the answer? All of you are giving different answers. Yeah, Karan, that's the correct answer. Good. So 122 degrees Fahrenheit. First, to convert to degrees C. So you can see that it is 122 minus 32 into 5 by 9. Okay. So it is 50 degrees C. So 50 degrees C is 273 plus 50. Or yeah, Karan, that's correct. You got the correct answer. Wait. This should be modified slightly. Make a change in this. It is y minus 32 whole thing into 5 by 9. Okay. Again, that's easy to understand why that's the case, na? Because so a temperature of some y degrees Fahrenheit, this delta T, okay, so this temperature, yeah, Tej. So just make sure that you adjust the formula correctly. That 5 by 9 is outside the bracket. But more importantly, understand it from the diagram here, then it's very clear. Okay, good. So, like, this is a very trivial portion. Now, let's come to the first important section of heat and thermodynamics. From the list I told you earlier, we'll start with thermal properties, and in that, we'll start with thermal expansion. Now, again, this is something that you are familiar from before, and you experience it in everyday life that all materials or all matter tends to undergo an expansion or an increase in its geometrical dimensions when we heat it, or it tends to undergo compression or a decrease in its geometrical dimensions when we tend to cool a material. So, from common things like the glass of a window pane expanding because of extreme heat and therefore cracking, to that phenomena of railway tracks where they are joined together, always a bit of gap is left to allow for the thermal expansion. Because if the gap is not left, then on summer days, due to expansion of very long railway tracks, extreme amount of expansion will result in extreme amount of stress, and the tracks will tend to get bent. Okay, so these are phenomena that we observe in everyday life, which point to the fact that all matter tends to experience thermal expansion. Actually, it's not just expansion, it's either way. When we heat the temperature, when we increase the temperature, there's expansion, and likewise, when we cool the temperature, there's compression. So, thermal expansion is the expansion in the physical dimensions. By dimensions, we mean length, width, height, surface area, volume, all geometrical dimensions basically, etc. So increase or expansion in physical dimensions when temperature is raised. Okay. Or equally important is compression when temperature is dropped. So all matter tends to undergo this. Some materials tend to undergo more expansion or a larger, more rapid rate of expansion compared to others. Like metals tend to undergo more expansion compared to certain non-metallic materials, etc. But nonetheless, so the first category of expansion we will see is linear expansion. The principle of linear expansion. So this is to do with the fact that any linear dimension okay. For example, L could be the length of a rod or a cylinder, okay, or a block or whatever. Okay, L could be the radius or diameter of a disc or even a sphere, like that. Any linear dimension, yeah. So any linear dimension undergoes an expansion or compression with a rise or drop in temperature, okay, according to a formula. So now this is experimentally observed, so such that the fractional change in length, that is a change in length upon original length, is directly proportional to the change in temperature, and the constant of proportionality is a property, a physical property called coefficient of linear expansion. Okay. So delta T here is the change in temperature. So for a temperature rise, it will be positive. For a temperature drop, it will be negative. And delta L is the change in the length dimension. Okay. So alpha is a constant of proportionality, and it is called coefficient of linear expansion. And it is what we call a thermal property of a given material. Yes, Vashish, that is true. The value of alpha changes according to different materials. So copper, for example, has a different value of alpha compared to silver or steel, or for that matter, compared to wood or plastic. So that is what we mean by saying that it is a material property. It depends on the nature of the material which is undergoing the expansion. Yes, the value of alpha is experimentally determined for different materials. And for you, it will be given in a question. But in general, alpha cannot be theoretically calculated. So that is why in different engineering manuals, you will see that the values of material properties like thermal coefficients, then elasticity, viscosity, malleability, ductility, um, conductivity, electrical conductivity, electrical resistivity. These are all standard material properties which are experimentally determined. And it is important to know their values when we are doing any calculations resulting in uh, any sort of system that we are designing, any engineering system or any machinery, etc., that is being designed. So those particular physical phenomena need to be taken into consideration. So that is when those values become important. Okay, so for example, if you are structural engineer designing a glass and steel building, then you need to understand, that depending on what kind of weather conditions or temperature conditions that structure is going to exist in, what kind of temperature range it will undergo, and accordingly you need to plan the dimensions and how much gap you will leave for the rubber sealant between glass and steel structures, so that you are safe from the effects of thermal expansion. So to do those calculations, you will need to beforehand know the values of the coefficients for the different materials you're using. And those values are determined from very precise experiments. And then they are published in engineering manuals or so accordingly the, the design is done. So at the engineering level, there is high precision involved in these things. Okay. So metals typically have alpha of the order of magnitude 10 raised power minus 6 per degree C. Okay. The unit of alpha is per Kelvin or per degree C, because remember delta L by L, this is a dimensionless quantity. It's a unitless or dimensionless quantity. So therefore alpha into delta T has to be dimensionless. Okay, so now another way to express the same formula, if L is equal to L1 at a temperature T equal to T1, and L is equal to L2 at a temperature equal to T2, where T2 is equal to T1 plus delta T. So you can see that, so this means that L2 minus L1 upon L1 is equal to alpha into T2 minus T1. Okay, so this is not a different formula. It is just a way of expressing this equation in a different manner in terms of final length and original length. Because it's change in length upon original length. No? Delta L by L, it is expressed as change in length divided by original length. Okay. Or you can think of it list like this, that it is the final value minus the initial value divided by the initial value. So that's why it's L2 minus L1 upon L1, because T1 is the initial temperature and T2 is the final temperature. Okay, so hope this is clear. Now let's do our first example. So suppose we have a metal rod of length 50.00 meters at an original temperature of 27 degrees C. Now alpha for that particular metal is given to us as 2 into 10 raised to the minus 6 per degree C. So first thing is we want to find its length at a temperature of 77 degrees C. Okay, and the percentage change in length. Then second, want to find the temperature at which its length will become and we also need to do this. Okay. So just try this out, people. Yes, Yash and Bashish, your answers are correct. Yes, your answer is correct. Okay, so let's look at the first part. So let's just use this. So the length at 77 will become 50.00 into 1 plus alpha, which is 2 into 10 raised to minus 6, into the temperature difference, which is this. Okay, so this becomes a length at 77 degrees, whereas this was the length at 27 degrees. Okay, I'll check the answer. Now we can see the percentage change. Because from here you can see that the change in length. Yeah, so now let's come to the second and third part. In the second part, the this much. Okay. So delta L is 0.02. So now delta L by L is equal to alpha delta T. So so delta T comes out to be 200. So T2 is equal to T1 plus delta T. Okay, and likewise the third one, same way of doing the question. But third one, we will see that there is a negative change in length. So accordingly, there's a negative change in temperature. Yeah, so actually, let's just change the question a little bit because remember 0 Kelvin is the limit. So just I'm making an adjustment to this. Yeah, so that earlier length would not have been possible because it would conclude that the temperature is going below 0 Kelvin, which is physically not possible. So okay, so this is like the standard type of application. Now let's look at an interesting type of application question. Tej, if required, we will keep a separate session for discussion of any previous doubts. But now mostly we will continue ahead with heat and thermodynamics. Okay. Yeah, Didi, this is direct application question. So we'll come back to this from the notes earlier. Okay. You can uh, pick the question up from the notes later. Okay. Let's move on to one more question now. Now we have this situation. We have one rod which is of length 100 meters at a temperature of 20 degrees C. And we have a second rod which is of some unknown length at that same temperature of 20 degrees C. Now this rod is made of a material which has an alpha of 2 into 10 raised power minus 6 per degree C. Whereas the first rod is made of a different metal which is of alpha, let's say 3 into 10 raised power minus 6 per degree C. Okay. Now find the value of L2 such that the difference in their lengths L2 minus L1 does not change when the temperature is changed. Okay, so first of all, try to understand what the question is saying, and then we'll discuss what is how to solve it. Okay, so try to understand what is meant by the fact that the difference in their lengths is not changing with temperature. Okay, so let's work out this question. Yeah, Vashish, understand. So at T naught equal to 20 degrees C, the difference in their lengths is L2 minus 100. Okay, or let us say L2 is some x. So then we can say it is x minus 100. Okay, so let's say this L2's value is x at 20 degrees. Now at t equal to t naught plus delta t, this one's length suppose becomes L1 prime. So that is L1 1 plus alpha 1 delta t. So that is 100 into 1 plus 3 into 10 raised power minus 6 delta t. This one's length L2 prime becomes L2 into this. So this is x into 1 plus 2 into 10 raised power minus 6 delta t. Now the difference in length at this temperature, that is this. This is the new difference in length. Now this difference in length should be equal to this difference in length. Okay, so as you can see now in this, when we equate these two quantities, we just get a very simple relation that x into 1 plus alpha 2 delta t minus 100 into 1 plus alpha 1 delta t you can put the values of alpha 1 and alpha 2 in later, is equal to x minus 100. So x minus 100 plus x alpha 2 minus 100 alpha 1 into delta t should be equal to x minus 100. That means okay. Okay, so hope this question is clear, people. And with this, we conclude today's session. So next time we will discuss about surface and volume expansion. Yeah, but see, the thing is that what the condition required is that these two should be equal, whatever be the value of delta T. So this left hand side is equal to right hand side for any delta T. Only then it's independent of temperature. It's the same for all temperatures. So this is true for all delta T. For any value of delta T. That's why. Okay. Okay, so that's it for today, people. Wish you all the best. Next time we'll pick up surface and volume expansion, and from there we'll move on to calorimetry. Okay, good night. Bye.